when I came into your studio this morning, I was really struck by this painting, which you say is in process. That it could possibly be finished,
yes,
but that it isn't necessarily finished.
Right. So I play with that tension of when do you start, when do you stop, kind of along the way, and the process is really important. Any artist would know that. The process, it's all about process. So when I approach a painting in horizons, oftentimes I will focus on a fairly straight line. And straight lines don't happen in nature unless you're really far away. Even then, there's the curve of the earth, right? So I find that some of the tools that I make I make my own knives. So I'll use and then be inspired by the color contrast as I line them up and I find information from my tools.
Oh, wow.
A lot of times I might push into certain directions, but what this allows me to do is find line, and I oftentimes will work with measurements that have to do with the Fibonacci sequence.
Oh.
So I'll take that 1.61803 and apply it to the canvas, and sometimes I'll run away from those things and see where it takes me, but a lot of times they help guide me to something that I will find that's pleasing. And with horizons, it's really about the knife. I have a color here that I'm working with. So
did you establish that first?
Or
not necessarily?
Yes. So
okay.
I established, actually, these started off with snap lines, like
Oh yeah,
lines.
A plumb line like
Right.
you do, yeah.
And I go back to line. Straight lines can be such a grounding thing with horizon, but they can also sort of like make me want to push against the straight line because I'm trying to find that gestural nature. And so I find that with my mark making, and you'll see, like, for example, if I included this into my horizon, what I might find. So I'll be asking myself questions about what did I discover on my surfaces as I work them, right? And these are techniques that I've learned over my own study and looking at other artists and how they solve problems. There's a nature of this material I like that helps bend a little bit, so I can create slightly contoured lines. So this is something that, as far as the tools go, is really important to me, to be able to use these types of knives in my larger horizon work. And then I will, something else that, a little trick that I learned going through is transparency. So this is a knife that I made out of plexiglass. And what I end up finding is beautiful, wonderful expression out of my plexi. Right?
Yes.
So this is gestural mark making out of my tool. This is my tool, and it becomes my art. So I like to find how things like this surface that I'm standing on can become my inspiration. And I try and push these things out as I go, and what can I draw the information from and apply it to my work.
Well, I was going to ask you about these, what I consider to be calligraphic markings up here above the painting surface.
Yes, this is a language that I create as I do more gestural work, which I'll go ahead and pull a piece out here. There's a couple of different ones. And in fact, I have some clips. Well, this one is not quite long enough, but...
Do you want me to hold together?
Yeah, so if you held that. So this piece has more language with writing, more like mark making. You can see I'm digging into the surface a little bit more here, and building layers and washes. You can see that under the very first layer is charcoal drawing on canvas, just dry canvas, and I've left some of these materials exposed to the finished piece, so I don't cover everything, and that has to do with the layers of meaning and the writing that I like to get. It's a little bit more poetic.
Yes.
Yeah.
You'd mentioned in some of your writing in the hall that was talking about your motivation as an artist and what you wanted the viewer to see.
Right.
And you did mention a poetic element. And I wanted to get to that because I do think that implies language and words.
Yes.
And I really, truly was, before I started talking to you today, I was curious about how that could, how a painting like this could contain that.
Right. So jumping, you can still see there's reminiscent marks here from my horizon and how I move across, but it is a little bit of a pulling away from these more distant stark lines and getting right up into mark making and the gestures of writing. So I do feel that this type of work, especially with frequency and intensity and digging in, really gives me a gesture, and it's very much like writing, an expressive writing. So these are thoughts about how that looks. If I can, it's functionally working like writing, but it also is an emotional content.
So it's communication.
Communication, yes.
But it's not necessarily linguistic.
Right.
It's not necessarily just visual.
Right.
I think I'm starting to understand. I mean, there's so much texture to it. And you said I could touch.
Yes.
There's so much texture in this piece and depth. It's very expressive. I mean,
Right.
I am getting that.
And I chose this this canvas surface because it has a fold in it, and I'm using this subtlety to relate back to my other work, and the horizon line, the vertical line. So I'm playing with these concepts and ideas as I go.
I'm so excited to see you embrace something as simple as a fold in cloth and consider that to be part of your artwork process and the result. I think that's really exciting that you weren't in here with an iron or something like that, like having to start with a uniform flatness or something like that.
Yeah.
So that goes in my mind to some of the sense of play and the improvisation and about how you were willing as an artist to take what is in front of you and make
almost
art.
a found objectness of what will you find along the way that contributes to your inspiration. And I love that word, improvisation. It's just an adaptability and a discovery.
You know, this is one thing I had forgotten to ask you about earlier. I wanted to ask you about the whole challenge of an artist. In my mind is sometimes the holding certain things in mind, an intention, if you will, many intentions or precepts, things you've learned about art, about creating depth and layering and things like that, and color and contrast and all those things, with a sense of freedom. Do you find that are you able to do that well?
Yeah, I feel like the formal elements of art are very good as like references, sort of camps to line yourself up with. How am I doing with line? How am I doing with color? How am I doing with shape? What are my forms? And then introducing those compositional elements with rhythm and asking those questions and letting. You can continue on, but allowing some of those things to become more important in a piece, and it's almost restrictive in that way. But those sometimes can be the best pieces.